Thank you. I'd like to dedicate this award to the two people who, in their own unique way, made it all possible. Imani Wright's voice rang out, clear and steely, across the opulent ballroom of the National Architecture Awards. She stood on the stage, poised and powerful in a sapphire blue gown, clutching the prestigious trophy. Every light, every camera was on her. She paused, her calm gaze sweeping over the crowd until it locked onto a table near the front. To my husband, Rick Sterling, the camera instantly panned, capturing Rick's face as his smug smile froze and then collapsed. And, of course, to his 24-year-old muse, Jessie. Imani gave a slight, deliberate nod toward the young blonde woman seated next to Rick, whose expression morphed from confusion to sheer horror as she was identified in front of the industry's most powerful figures. Imani then turned her gaze directly to the main camera, a sharp, knowing smile playing on her lips. You both taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes you have to burn everything to the ground, just to see what's truly worth building. Rick thought he was leaving his boring wife for a thrilling new adventure. He thought he was in control. What he didn't know was that his betrayal wasn't the final chapter. It was the first brick. The first brick in a smart revenge so perfectly designed, it would leave him absolutely shocked. This isn't a story about a broken heart. This is the story of how a brilliant architect used those broken pieces to build an empire and design the downfall of the very man who left her in the ashes. You're not going to want to miss a single detail of how this plot unfolds. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to see what happens next. And while you're at it, let us know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. We love knowing that a great story can connect us all, no matter the distance or the time zone. The Napa Valley sun dipped low, painting the rolling hills in strokes of gold and amber. From her studio's wide windows, Imani Wright watched the vineyards stretch toward the horizon. Their orderly rows a testament to patience and care. The scene should have soothed her, as it had for years, but tonight a restless unease coiled in her chest, tightening with each breath. At 34, Imani was a vision of quiet strength, her slender frame poised at her drafting table, hair falling in soft waves that caught the fading light. Her fingers, elegant and sure, traced the lines of her latest design, a solar-powered glass dome for the Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort, a project that could redefine Sterling Designs, the company she'd poured her soul into, alongside her husband, Rick Sterling. The studio, a sanctuary she'd designed herself, was her refuge. Every angle, every beam spoke of her vision, clean lines harmonizing with the natural world outside. Yet the peace she once found here felt fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. For months, subtle shifts in Rick's behavior had crept into their life, small but sharp, like thorns hidden in the vines. Late-night phone calls he took on the balcony, his voice dropping to a murmur. A new cologne, heavy with sandalwood, replacing the citrusy scent she'd chosen for him years ago. And tonight, his dismissal of her work had cut deeper than ever. Imani leaned back, her eyes lingering on the blueprint. The dome was her pride, a structure that would capture sunlight to power the resort, blending innovation with the valley's timeless beauty. Rick, what do you think? She'd asked earlier, her voice bright with hope as she spread the sketches across their dining table. It'll cut energy costs by 40%, and the space will feel like a cathedral of light. Rick, 35 and still boyishly handsome, with his tousled blonde-brown hair and sharp green eyes, had barely glanced at the drawings. He'd been scrolling through his phone, a habit that had grown as persistent as his absences. Imani, let's be realistic, he said, his tone laced with a condescension that stung like a slap. Clients want flash, something that sells. Your sustainability stuff is too academic. He'd patted her shoulder, a gesture that once felt warm, but now seemed patronizing. Leave the creative vision to me, all right? You handle the technical side. The words echoed in her mind now, each one a needle pricking her pride. Creative vision? For 15 years, every breakthrough at Sterling Designs had come from her. Her sketches, her late nights, her sacrifices. She'd turned down a national award to support Rick's fledgling company, letting him take the spotlight while she worked in the shadows. And yet here he was, reducing her to a technician in her own home. Imani's gaze drifted to the silver ring on her right hand, a gift from her mother, its simple band a reminder of her own resilience. She twisted it absently, her thoughts spiraling. The Rick she'd fallen for had been different, a charming dreamer who'd marveled at her student portfolio, calling her designs magic. She could still picture him in their early days, leaning over her sketches with wide-eyed wonder, promising they'd build an empire together. But that Rick felt like a ghost now, replaced by a man who slipped away into late nights and vague excuses. The creak of the front door pulled her from her reverie. Rick's footsteps echoed through the house, followed by the low hum of his voice on the phone. Imani stood, moving silently to the studio door, her heart thudding. Through the crack, she saw him on the balcony, his silhouette framed against the twilight. His laughter, low and intimate, carried through the still air. Not the laugh he shared with her, but something softer, secretive. "Yeah, I'll be there," he murmured, then paused. "You're killing me with that smile, you know." Her breath caught, sharp and cold. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if to hold her heart in place. The call ended, and Rick slipped the phone into his pocket, oblivious to her presence. He stepped inside, his eyes skimming past her to the kitchen. "You still up?" he called, casual, as if the world hadn't just tilted beneath her feet. Imani forced a nod, retreating to her desk. "Just finishing some work," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. As Rick grabbed a beer and headed upstairs, she sank into her chair, the blueprint blurring before her eyes. The studio, once her haven, felt like a cage now, its walls closing in with every unanswered question. Later that night, unable to sleep, Imani wandered into Rick's office, a space cluttered with his trophies and her uncredited designs. She was tidying papers, a habit born of years keeping their shared dream organized, when her fingers brushed a folded receipt. Her pulse quickened as she unfolded it. A bill from Le Jardin, a French restaurant in San Francisco, dated the night of their anniversary. The night Rick had texted her about a client dinner, arriving home past midnight with a hurried excuse. The receipt listed 2 glasses of champagne, a shared dessert, intimate details that carved a hollow ache in her chest. They'd never been to Le Jardin together. Imani's knees buckled and she sank to the floor, the receipt trembling in her hand. The memory of that anniversary night flooded back, her waiting alone with a bottle of wine, wearing the sapphire dress he loved, hoping to rekindle something. He'd barely looked at her when he returned, muttering about traffic. Now the truth was undeniable, a poison seeping through her veins. Someone else was claiming his time, his laughter, his promises. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she rose, her movements deliberate, and returned to her studio. The blueprint of the solar dome lay waiting, a symbol of her brilliance, her heart. She traced its lines, her fingers steady now. The whispers of doubt had grown into a roar, but with it came clarity. Whoever this other woman was, whatever Rick was hiding, Imani would not let it destroy her. She'd built this life, every brick, every dream, and she'd be damned if she let him steal it. In the quiet of the night, with only the hum of crickets and the distant rustle of vines, Imani made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, not with tears or accusations, but with the precision of an architect drafting her masterpiece. The receipt, still clutched in her hand, was the first crack in Rick's facade. Tomorrow she'd start dismantling it, piece by careful piece, until she stood in the light of her own making. The receipt from Le Jardin lay crumpled on Imani Wright's drafting table, its edges curling like a confession left to wilt. The Napa Valley night pressed against the studio windows, dark and heavy, mirroring the weight in her chest. Last night's discovery had cracked open a fault line in her world, and now, at 34, Imani stood on its edge, staring into the abyss of her husband's betrayal. The elegant lines of her solar dome designed for Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort still spread before her, felt like a lifeline, a reminder of who she was beneath the pain. But the whispers of doubt from the vineyards had solidified into a truth she could no longer ignore. Imani's fingers, steady despite the tremor in her heart, reached for her phone. She opened the family tracking app, a tool they'd installed years ago for mundane coordination. Her breath hitched as she scrolled to the night of their anniversary, the night Rick claimed a client dinner. The red dot on the map didn't point to Sterling Design's office or any conference room. It glowed over a boutique hotel on the San Francisco waterfront, its name, Harbor Lights, etched into her mind like a scar. The air in her lungs turned to ice. She set the phone down, her movements slow, deliberate, as if any sudden motion might shatter her entirely. She didn't want to look further, but she had to. Rick's tablet, left carelessly on his office desk, beckoned. Its screen flickered to life under her touch, still logged into his Instagram. The profile of Jessie Vance, a 24-year-old influencer with a cascade of platinum blonde hair and a smile that screamed ambition, stared back. Imani's heart thudded as she scrolled through their private messages, each word a dagger. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe," Rick had written, followed by heart emojis that felt like mockery. And then, buried in the thread, a photo stopped her cold. Her own sketch of the infinity pool for Serenity Ridge, its graceful curves unmistakable. Beneath it, Rick's message: "All my best ideas are for you, my muse. We'll watch the sunset from this pool someday." The pencil in Imani's hand snapped with a dry crack, the sound echoing in the silent studio. Her vision blurred, not with tears, but with a rage so sharp it burned away the hurt. This wasn't just an affair. Rick, the man she'd built a life with, had stolen her soul, her designs, her creativity, and offered them to a stranger as if they were his to give. She sank to the floor, the hardwood cool against her palms, and let the weight of it settle. The house around her, every beam and corner shaped by her vision, felt foreign now, a monument to a love that had been a lie. Memories clawed at her. 10 years ago, she'd stood on a stage, a national architecture award within reach, only to step back for Rick. He'd been struggling to launch Sterling Designs, his charisma outpacing his talent. "We're a team, Imani," he'd said, his green eyes bright with promise. "Your designs, my hustle, will be unstoppable." She'd believed him, trading her spotlight for late nights drafting plans he'd present as his own. Every accolade Sterling Designs earned bore her fingerprints, yet his name alone graced the letterhead. And now he'd given her work to Jessie, a girl young enough to be their intern, as if Imani's sacrifices meant nothing. She rose, her slender frame taut with resolve. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath her ribs, but it was no match for the clarity taking root. She wouldn't confront him, not yet. Tears and accusations would only feed his ego, let him think he'd broken her. Instead, she'd dismantle his betrayal with the same precision she brought to her blueprints. She moved to her desk, tucking the receipt into a drawer, a piece of evidence she'd guard like a weapon. Her eyes fell on the solar dome sketch, its lines a testament to her brilliance. Rick might have stolen her work, but he couldn't steal her mind. Imani's thoughts raced. She needed proof, not just of the affair, but of her contributions to Sterling Designs. She opened her laptop, her fingers flying as she copied CAD files, emails, and dated sketches to a private drive. Each click was a step toward reclaiming her power, her identity. She paused, remembering a moment from their early days. Rick, awestruck, tracing her first vineyard project with a fingertip, whispering, "You're a genius, Imani." That memory, once warm, now fuels her resolve. He'd forgotten who she was. She'd make him remember. As dawn crept through the windows, painting the studio in soft pinks, Imani stood, her silhouette sharp against the light. She wasn't the grieving wife Rick might expect. She was Imani Wright, architect, creator, a woman who'd built his empire from nothing. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, a theft of her legacy. She thought of Jessie's Instagram, the carefree posts of a girl who thought she'd won. Let her gloat, Imani thought. Every misstep would be a brick in the foundation of her counterattack. She closed her laptop, the click as final as a locked door. The house, silent now, held the ghosts of their shared dreams. But Imani was done living in its shadows. She'd built this life, brick by brick, and she'd tear it down if she had to, only to rebuild something better, something hers. As she stepped into the hallway, the faint scent of Rick's sandalwood cologne lingered, a reminder of the man she'd once loved. But love was a blueprint she could redraw, and this time, she'd sign her name to every line. The morning light spilled across the vineyards outside, their leaves whispering secrets to the breeze. Amani's heart steadied, her plan taking shape like a new design. She'd start by digging deeper, finding every crack in Rick's lies. And then she'd find an ally, someone who valued her vision, not just her labor. The thought sparked a name, Arthur Coleman, Rick's rival, a man whose legacy matched her own ambitions. She didn't know how yet, but she'd make him see her. The sound of her broken design still echoed, but it was no longer a lament. It was the first note of her resurrection. The dawn light that had bathed Amani Wright's studio in soft pinks now burned with the fierce clarity of morning, casting long shadows across her Napa Valley home. The receipt from Le Jardin and the damning photo of her stolen infinity pool sketch still lingered in her mind, each a shard of Rick Sterling's betrayal embedded in her heart. But the cold fury that had replaced her pain was a forge, tempering her resolve into something unbreakable. At 34, Imani stood at her drafting table, her slender fingers tracing the solar dome design for Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort, a creation Rick had dismissed as academic. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for her name, her legacy, her soul. The sound of her broken design from the night before had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of a plan taking shape. Imani moved with purpose, her elegant silhouette a stark contrast to the chaos within. She opened her laptop, its screen glowing with the weight of her counterattack. Hour after hour, she copied every CAD file, every email exchange with Rick, every dated sketch from the past decade, saving them to a private drive. Each file was a brick in the fortress of her truth, proof that Sterling Design's success bore her fingerprints, not his. She paused at a scan of her first vineyard project, the one Rick had once called magic. The memory stung, but it also fueled her. He'd built his empire on her sacrifices, her awards she declined, her nights spent refining his pitches. No more. Her eyes flicked to the silver ring on her right hand, her mother's gift, a talisman of resilience. She needed an ally, someone who could amplify her voice, not silence it. Arthur Coleman's name surfaced like a beacon. At 48, the real estate developer was Rick's fiercest rival, a man whose philosophy of legacy architecture mirrored her own passion for sustainable design. She'd read his interviews, watched his talks. His projects weren't just buildings. They were statements, built to endure and honor the land. If anyone could see her worth, it was him. But approaching him meant stepping out of Rick's shadow, a risk that made her pulse race. Imani opened her phone, hesitating only a moment before dialing Coleman Global Properties. Using her maiden name, Imani Jean-Pierre, she spoke to the assistant with a confidence that masked her nerves. "I'm an independent architect with a proposal for Serenity Ridge," she said, her voice steady. "I believe Mr. Coleman will want to hear this." To her surprise, the assistant scheduled a meeting for the following week in San Francisco. As she hung up, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Could she trust Coleman, or was she trading one powerful man's ego for another? She pushed the thought aside. This wasn't about trust. It was about reclaiming what was hers. The days before the meeting were a blur of preparation. Imani refined her Serenity Ridge design, enhancing the solar dome with intricate calculations that balanced aesthetics and efficiency. She pinpointed flaws in Rick's version, structural oversights she'd once corrected for him, now left unchecked in his haste to impress Jesse Vance. Each night, as Rick slept upstairs, oblivious, Imani worked in her studio, her hair falling in soft waves as she leaned over her sketches. The silence was her ally, a canvas for her silent draft. But beneath her focus, a quiet battle raged. Part of her wanted to scream at Rick, to shatter his smug facade. Yet she knew rage would only weaken her. Strategy was her weapon now. The morning of the meeting, Imani dressed with care, choosing a tailored black blazer and trousers, her elegance understated but commanding. The drive to San Francisco was a study in contrasts, Napa's rolling vines giving way to the city's sharp edges. Coleman's office, perched high above the bay, was a temple of glass and steel, its clean lines echoing her own aesthetic. Arthur Coleman greeted her with a firm handshake, his silver hair catching the light, his gray eyes sharp with curiosity. At 48, he carried the gravitas of experience, his presence both imposing and warm. "Ms. Jean-Pierre," he said, gesturing to a seat, "your call intrigued me. Let's see what you got." Amani spread her blueprints across the polished table, her voice steady as she unveiled her vision for Serenity Ridge, a resort that married cutting-edge sustainability with the valley's timeless beauty. She highlighted the solar dome's energy savings, its glass arches designed to reflect the sky. Then, with surgical precision, she exposed the flaws in Sterling Design's competing plan. Unstable load-bearing supports, inefficient layouts, and a facade that clashed with the landscape. Coleman listened, his fingers steepled, never interrupting. When she finished, silence hung in the room, heavy with possibility. Coleman leaned back, studying her. "Ms. Wright, or should I say Jean-Pierre," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I've followed your work since your National Student Award. I always wondered why a talent like yours vanished behind Sterling's name. Now I see." Amani's breath caught. He knew her, not as Rick's wife, but as the architect she'd been before. The recognition was a spark, igniting her confidence. "I'm ready to step forward," she said, meeting his gaze. "This project is mine." Coleman nodded, his smile widening. "Your design is a masterpiece. I'll back it, but on one condition. You're the lead architect. I want Imani Jean-Pierre's name on this, front and center." The words were a lifeline, pulling her from the shadows. But as she shook his hand, a shadow of doubt lingered. Was this victory worth the cost of her heart, hardened by betrayal? Could she rebuild without losing the compassion that had once defined her? She pushed the thought down, focusing on the path ahead. This was her chance to rewrite her story, to sign her name to her own legacy. As she left Coleman's office, the San Francisco skyline glittered below, a reminder of the world waiting for her. She'd returned to Napa, to Rick's lies and Jesse's careless boasts, but now she carried a secret, a draft of her resurrection, drawn in silence but ready to speak. The next move was hers, and she'd play it with the precision of an architect crafting her greatest work. The San Francisco skyline faded in Imani Wright's rearview mirror as she drove back to Napa, the weight of Arthur Coleman's offer anchoring her resolve. At 34, she carried a secret that could redraw the lines of her life. She was now the lead architect for Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort, her name, Imani Jean-Pierre, set to headline a project that would eclipse her husband Rick Sterling's ambitions. The meeting with Coleman had reignited her spark, but the doubt that flickered in his office lingered. Could she wield this power without losing herself to vengeance? The question clung to her as she pulled into the driveway of the home she designed, its familiar beams now a stage for the act she had to play. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the faint clink of Rick's beer bottle as he lounged in the living room. His blonde-brown hair was mussed, his green eyes scanning his phone with a smirk that made Imani's stomach churn. The memory of his messages to Jesse Vance, the 24-year-old influencer who'd claimed her infinity pool design, burned fresh. But Imani's face betrayed nothing. She'd learned from the receipt, the stolen sketch, and Coleman's recognition that her strength lay in precision, not outburst. Tonight she'd begin her performance. "Rick, we need to talk," she said, her voice heavy with a crafted weariness. She stood in the doorway, her slender frame silhouetted against the hall's warm light, her hair falling in soft waves. Rick looked up, startled, his smirk faltering. "What's up, babe?" he asked, his tone too casual, as if he could deflect her with charm. Imani sat across from him, folding her hands to steady herself. "I know about Jesse," she said, letting the name drop like a stone into still water. Rick's face froze, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. "Imani, he started, but she raised a hand, her expression one of resigned defeat. "Don't. I want a divorce. Clean, quiet, no drama." Her words were a lie, but her delivery was flawless, each syllable masking the storm within. Rick's relief was palpable, his shoulders relaxing as he leaned forward, playing the penitent husband. "I'm so sorry, Imani. It was a mistake." I'll agree to whatever you want. His haste to accept betrayed his eagerness to move on, to trade her for Jesse's fleeting glamour. Imani nodded, her face a mask of sorrow, but inside she was laying the first bricks of her counterattack. Let him think he'd won. Let him underestimate her. By day, Imani played the grieving wife, packing boxes with a slowness that sold her act. She moved through their home, touching the walls she'd designed, each a reminder of the empire she'd built for Rick. But her nights belonged to her true self. Coleman had provided a private studio overlooking San Francisco Bay, its glass walls flooding the space with light that fueled her creativity. There, surrounded by a team of architects who respected her vision, Imani refined Serenity Ridge. She enhanced the solar dome's efficiency, wove in eco-friendly materials, and crafted a resort that felt like an extension of the valley itself. Her team marveled at her precision, unaware of the personal stakes driving her. Jessie, oblivious, became an unwitting ally. Her Instagram posts, dripping with self-congratulation, were a goldmine. Ricky's killing it with Serenity Ridge. Precure power couple, she captioned a photo of herself at the project site, a corner of Rick's flawed blueprint visible. Another post showed a meeting with contractors, Rick's unstable load-bearing design on display. Imani screenshots each one, her lips curling faintly. Jessie's need to flaunt was handing her the tools to dismantle Rick's facade. But a late-night post gave Imani pause. Watch out, sneaky competitors lurking. Tronde's Team Sterling. The vague accusation sent a chill through her. Had Jessie sensed something? Was Rick suspicious? Imani's heart raced as she adjusted her strategy, working late into the night to ensure her design was flawless. In the studio's quiet, she faced a deeper question. Was this plan, her calculated act, turning her into someone like Rick, manipulative and cold? The thought gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't about sinking to his level. It was about justice, about reclaiming her name. She thought of her mother's silver ring, its weight grounding her. She wasn't fighting for revenge. She was fighting for Imani Jean-Pierre, the architect Rick had buried. One evening, as she reviewed her blueprints, Coleman stopped by the studio. His silver hair glinted under the lights, his presence steadying. You're pushing yourself hard, he said, concern softening his sharp eyes. Imani hesitated, then admitted, I have to. This isn't just a project, it's my life. Coleman nodded, sharing a brief story of a project he'd lost early in his career to a rival's deceit. It taught me to fight smarter, not angrier, he said. His words eased her doubt, reinforcing her path. She wasn't alone in this. Back home, Rick grew bolder, his late-night calls to Jessie less discreet. Imani overheard him laughing about their future at Serenity Ridge, oblivious to the storm she was brewing. Each word strengthened her resolve. She was no longer the wife waiting in the wings. She was the architect crafting her own stage. The gala loomed, a moment where her silent draft would become a public declaration. As she packed another box, her fingers brushed a photo of her and Rick from their early days, his arm around her, both smiling. She set it aside, her heart steady. The act was working, but the real performance was yet to come. The grand ballroom of the National Architecture Awards in Washington, D.C. shimmered under crystal chandeliers, its opulence a fitting stage for Imani Wright's moment of reckoning. At 34, she'd spent weeks in Arthur Coleman's sunlit San Francisco studio, refining her Serenity Ridge Vineyard resort design while playing the grieving wife to her husband, Rick Sterling. Her silent draft, built on the pain of his betrayal with Jesse Vance, had led to this night, a chance to reclaim her name, Imani Jean-Pierre, and expose the man who'd stolen her work. As she stepped into the hall, her sapphire gown hugged her slender frame, her hair falling in soft waves. She carried the weight of her plan like a blueprint etched in steel. The silver ring on her right hand, her mother's gift, gleamed as a reminder of her strength. Tonight, the world would see her. Imani took her seat beside Coleman, his silver hair catching the light, his gray eyes offering a nod of quiet confidence. Across the room, Rick and Jessie entered, their presence a calculated performance. Rick, 35, wore a bespoke tuxedo, his blonde-brown hair slicked back, his green eyes brimming with arrogance. Jessie, 24, clung to his arm, her platinum blonde hair cascading over a crimson dress that demanded attention. They believed Sterling Designs would claim the Serenity Ridge contract, unaware that Imani's screenshots of Jessie's Instagram posts, flaunting Rick's stolen, flawed designs, had armed her with the truth. Her heart raced, but her face remained serene, the act she'd perfected now a weapon ready to strike. The room hushed as the MC, a distinguished architect with a commanding presence, took the stage. "Tonight, we celebrate a vision that shapes our future," he announced, his voice resonating. "The Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort contract represents innovation and legacy." Rick leaned forward, his smirk widening, certain of victory. Jessie's eyes sparkled with dreams of their shared future, built on Imani's stolen work. Imani's fingers tightened around her ring, her pulse steady as she waited for the moment she'd engineered. "The winner," the MC declared, "is Coleman Global Properties." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rick's smirk vanished, his face paling as if struck. Jessie's hand froze on his arm, her confusion palpable. Coleman rose, his presence commanding, but he turned to the audience with a smile. "This award belongs to the true visionary behind Serenity Ridge," he said. "Please welcome the lead architect, Ms. Imani Jean-Pierre." The spotlight found Imani, and she stood, her movements poised, deliberate. Cameras flashed, capturing her ascent to the stage, her gown shimmering like a beacon. Whispers spread. Some knew her as Rick's wife, others as the prodigy who'd vanished after her student award. Rick stared, his mouth agape, a man watching his empire crumble. Jessie's face twisted from confusion to horror, sensing the trap closing. Imani gripped the prestigious trophy, its weight grounding her. She stepped to the microphone, her voice ringing clear and steely across the ballroom. "Thank you. I'd like to dedicate this award to the two people who, in their own unique way, made it all possible." She paused, her calm gaze sweeping the crowd until it locked onto Rick and Jessie's table. "To my husband, Rick Sterling." The camera panned, catching Rick's smug smile collapsing into shock. "And of course, to his 24-year-old muse, Jessie." Jessie's expression morphed to sheer horror, her identity exposed to the industry's elite. Imani gave a slight, deliberate nod, her eyes piercing. Turning to the main camera, a sharp, knowing smile played on her lips. "You both taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes you have to burn everything to the ground, just to see what's truly worth building." The room buzzed, a mix of awe and scandal. The MC stepped forward, his tone grave. "We must address an ethical breach," he said. "Evidence shows Sterling Design's submission relied on uncredited work by Ms. Jean-Pierre, presented as their own." A screen lit up, displaying Imani's dated sketches beside Rick's near-identical plans, timestamps, and Jessie's Instagram post sealing his guilt. The crowd murmured, heads turning to Rick, whose face burned red, his hands trembling. Imani continued, her voice unwavering. "Architecture is about creating spaces with soul, honoring the land and the future. Serenity Ridge is that vision, a legacy I'm proud to claim." Her words were a manifesto, each one a brick in the empire she was building. Rick sank into his chair, Jessie whispering furiously, but he was beyond saving. The industry saw him now, a thief unmasked by the woman he'd betrayed. As applause thundered, Imani stepped down, Coleman's proud smile meeting her. "You've redrawn the map," he whispered. She nodded, but a quiet doubt lingered. Had her victory hardened her heart? The question faded as she glanced at Rick, his defeat etched in his slumped frame. This wasn't the end, but the beginning of her ascent. The ballroom's lights glittered, promising a future she'd design on her own terms, with Rick and Jessie left in the ashes of their choices. The echoes of Imani Wright's triumph at the Bay Area Architectural Gala still reverberated as she stood in her Napa Valley studio, the morning light filtering through the vines outside. At 34, she'd reclaimed her name, Imani Jean-Pierre, and her legacy as the lead architect of Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort, exposing Rick Sterling's theft of her designs in a public reckoning. The gala's spotlight had illuminated her brilliance, but it had also cast a long shadow over Rick's empire, setting off a chain reaction that now shook the foundations of his world. Imani, her slender frame poised over her drafting table, felt the weight of her victory, tempered by a quiet question. Had her calculated reveal cost her the compassion that once defined her? The silver ring on her right hand, her mother's gift, gleamed as she traced the lines of her next project, anchoring her to her purpose. News of the gala spread like wildfire across San Francisco's architectural circles. By dawn, headlines in Architectural Digest and local papers hailed Imani as the new vision of West Coast design, her story of reclaiming her uncredited work inspiring awe, especially among women of color in the male-dominated industry. Her inbox overflowed with project offers, speaking invitations, and messages of admiration. But across town, Rick's world was imploding. Investors, spooked by the jury's revelation of his plagiarism, called in their loans. Banks froze Sterling Design's credit lines, citing reputational risk. Contractors canceled meetings, leaving Rick's office eerily silent, its trophy case a mocking reminder of a legacy built on stolen ideas. Imani learned of the fallout through industry whispers and Coleman's updates. Arthur Coleman, her ally at 48, had become more than a partner. Their shared passion for legacy architecture was forging a bond of mutual respect. One afternoon, as they walked the Serenity Ridge site, its skeletal beams rising against the Napa Hills, Coleman shared a rare glimpse into his past. "I lost a project once," he admitted, his silver hair catching the breeze. "A rival undercut me with lies. It nearly broke me, but it taught me to build with integrity, not ego." His words resonated, easing Imani's lingering doubts about her path. She wasn't Rick, driven by greed. She was rebuilding herself, brick by brick. Rick's relationship with Jesse Vance, the 24-year-old influencer who'd flaunted his stolen designs, crumbled as swiftly as his company. Jesse, who'd grown up scraping by in a small town, had seen Rick as her ticket to a glittering life of penthouses and private jets. But with Sterling Design's collapse, those dreams dissolved. Imani caught fragments of their unraveling through Jesse's increasingly desperate Instagram posts. Vague captions about tough times, replacing her usual charm power couple boasts. A mutual contact relayed a heated argument overheard at a cafe. Jesse screaming, "You promised me everything, Rick. This is your fault." And Rick snapping back, "You think posting every damn blueprint helped?" Their grand romance, built on lies and ambition, had no foundation to withstand reality. Imani, meanwhile, thrived. Her studio sessions with Coleman's team were electric, her vision for Serenity Ridge taking shape in glass and steel that harmonized with the valley's curves. Yet not all reactions to her rise were kind. At a site meeting, a former contractor of Rick's, his breath heavy with whiskey, muttered, "Didn't think a woman like you could pull this off." The jab, laced with subtle prejudice, stung, but Imani met his gaze with calm defiance. "A woman like me designed this," she said, gesturing to the rising resort. "Maybe you should rethink who you underestimate." The contractor slunk away, and her team exchanged nods of respect, her strength silencing doubters. Her success wasn't without cost. Late at night, alone in her studio, Imani wrestled with the emotional toll of her victory. She'd played the grieving wife to perfection, letting Rick believe he'd won, only to topple him at the gala. But had she hardened her heart in the process? She thought of their early days, when Rick's laughter had been genuine, when they dreamed together over her sketches. That man was gone, replaced by a thief who'd betrayed her trust and talent. Yet the memory of his green eyes, once warm, haunted her. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on her work, but it lingered like a shadow. Rick's desperation grew. Colleagues whispered of him, calling investors late at night, his voice frantic, promising impossible turnarounds. Jessie, now posting from cheaper cafes, had unfollowed him online, her dreams of glamour fading with his bank account. Imani, monitoring their unraveling through industry gossip, felt no joy in their fall, only a quiet satisfaction that justice was unfolding. Her focus was on Serenity Ridge, on the glass arches that would soon reflect Napa's skies, a testament to her reclaimed power. One evening, Coleman invited her to a quiet dinner at his office, the bay twinkling below. "You've changed the game, Imani," he said, raising a glass of wine from the vineyard they were building. "But are you ready for what's next?" His question, gentle but probing, stirred her. She was ready, ready to lead, to create, to inspire. But Rick's collapse was only the beginning. She knew he'd come for her, seeking blame or redemption, and she'd need to face him one last time to close this chapter. As she drove home, the vineyards whispering in the dark, Imani steeled herself for the confrontation. Her victory was secure, but its final test was coming. The Napa Valley wind swept across the Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort site, stirring dust around the rising steel beams that marked Imani Wright's triumph. At 34, she stood on the cusp of a new era. Her name, Imani Jean-Pierre, now synonymous with the architectural masterpiece that had toppled her husband Rick Sterling's empire at the Bay Area Gala. The aftershock of her public reveal still rippled. Rick's company was crumbling, his affair with Jessie Vance shattered, and Imani's star was rising, hailed as a trailblazer for women of color in architecture. Yet, as she walked the site, her hard hat casting a shadow over her elegant features, a quiet tension lingered. Coleman's question at their dinner, "Are you ready for what's next?" echoed in her mind. She knew Rick, desperate and cornered, would come for her, and she braced for the confrontation that would close this chapter of her life. The afternoon sun hung low, painting the vineyard in hues of gold as Imani reviewed progress with her project manager. The solar dome's glass panels were being installed, each catching the light like a promise kept. Her team moved with purpose, their respect for her palpable, a stark contrast to the years she'd spent in Rick's shadow. But as she pointed out a minor alignment issue, a familiar figure emerged from the site's entrance. Rick Sterling, 35 and haggard, his once sharp green eyes bloodshot, his blonde-brown hair unkempt. His suit, once tailored to impress, hung loose, a relic of his faded glory. Imani's pulse quickened, but she steadied herself, removing her hard hat, her hair falling in soft waves as she faced him. "Imani," Rick growled, his voice rough with desperation. "You planned this, didn't you? You destroyed me." His accusation cut through the hum of construction, drawing curious glances from workers. Imani gestured for her manager to step back, her gaze locked on Rick, calm but unyielding. The wind carried the scent of earth and vines, grounding her as she prepared to end this. "Destroyed you?" she said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "Rick, you did that yourself." She stepped closer, her slender frame radiating a quiet power that made him flinch. "You stole my designs, my years, my trust. I just took back what was mine." His face twisted, a mix of rage and shame. "I gave you everything," he spat. "A home, a life, a name in this industry, and you repay me by sabotaging me with Coleman?" His words were a desperate grasp at control, but they crumbled against her resolve. Imani's mind flashed to their early days, Rick's warm laughter over her sketches, his promises of a shared empire. That man was gone, replaced by this shadow who'd betrayed her with Jessie and claimed her work as his own. She tilted her head, studying him. "What did you give me, Rick?" she asked, her tone cutting through his bluster. "A chance to work for free? The honor of watching you take credit for my designs? Or the gift of finding your messages to Jessie, flaunting my infinity pool as your love token?" Her words were precise, each one a chisel carving away his defenses. Rick's eyes widened, the weight of his actions crashing down. "You used Coleman to steal Serenity Ridge," he shouted, stepping closer, his fist clenched. Imani didn't move, her composure a wall he couldn't breach. Behind her, a glass panel gleamed, etched with the names of inspiring women, a detail she'd added to honor her journey and others like her. It stood as a silent rebuke to his claim. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice low, final. "My name was always on those designs. I just decided it was time to sign them myself." The truth hung between them, sharp and unyielding. Rick's shoulders slumped, his anger giving way to a hollow realization. Imani's indifference, not hatred, not vengeance, was the final blow. He wasn't her enemy anymore. He was irrelevant, a ghost in the blueprint of her future. Rick's gaze dropped, his hands trembling. "I loved you, Imani," he whispered, a last-ditch plea. She looked at him, seeing not the man she'd married, but the thief who'd tried to erase her. "You loved what I could do for you," she said softly, "but I'm done building your dreams." She turned, gesturing to the rising resort. This is mine. As Rick stumbled away, his figure shrinking against the vineyard's expanse, Imani stood tall, the wind tugging at her hair. The workers resumed their tasks, their respect for her unspoken but clear. Alone for a moment, she touched the silver ring on her finger, her mother's gift, and let herself feel the cost of this moment. Had she lost something of herself in this fight? The question lingered, but as she looked at the etched glass, names like Maya Lin, Zaha Hadid, and her own mother's, she knew this was justice, not revenge. She'd reclaimed her voice, her work, her light. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the site. Imani's phone buzzed with a message from Coleman. Dinner tonight? We've got a legacy to celebrate. She smiled, her heart lighter. Rick's collapse was complete, but her story was just beginning. She'd face the world now, not as his wife, but as Imani Jean-Pierre, architect of her own destiny. The final design was hers, and it was flawless. The Napa Valley sun dipped low, bathing the newly opened Serenity Ridge Vineyard Resort in a golden glow that mirrored Imani Wright's quiet triumph. At 34, she stood on the presidential suite's balcony, the culmination of her journey from betrayal to brilliance. The resort, her masterpiece, rose around her, glass arches catching the sky, solar panels humming with sustainable power, a testament to her vision as Imani Jean-Pierre, the architect who'd reclaimed her legacy. Rick Sterling's confrontation at the construction site days ago had been the final stroke of her pen, his defeat sealed not by her anger, but by her indifference. As she'd watched him fade into the vineyard's shadows, Imani had felt the weight of her victory settle, not in vengeance, but in the freedom to build anew. Now with the resort open and her future unfolding, she was ready to step into the horizon she'd designed. The balcony overlooked the rolling vines, their leaves whispering in the evening breeze. Imani's slender fingers traced the edges of a sketchpad, her latest vision taking shape. A community arts center in Oakland, a space to nurture young dreamers. Her hair, falling in soft waves, caught the fading light as she worked, her elegant silhouette a quiet rebuke to the years she'd spent in Rick's shadow. The silver ring on her right hand, her mother's gift, gleamed as a reminder of her resilience. The gala's reveal, Coleman's faith, and Rick's collapse had all led to this moment, a new beginning, untainted by the past. Below, the resort buzzed with its opening celebration. Guests marveled at the glass dome, its curves reflecting the stars, and whispered about Imani's story, now legendary in architectural circles. Architectural Digest had dubbed her the visionary of the West, her rise a beacon for women of color in a field long dominated by others. Her firm, Right Vision Architects, had taken root in a sleek San Francisco office, its team of young architects fueled by her mentorship. She'd launched a scholarship for Black female architecture students, a nod to the etched glass panel at Serenity Ridge, inscribed with names of women who'd inspired her mother among them. Rick's fall had been as swift as her ascent. After their confrontation, Sterling Designs had been sold to cover debts, its legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. Industry gossip painted Rick as a shadow of his former self, taking small renovation jobs, kitchen remodels, bathroom upgrades, his charisma buried under the weight of his choices. Jesse Vance, the 24-year-old influencer who'd once flaunted his stolen designs, had fled to Los Angeles, her Instagram now a patchwork of forced smiles and fading glamour. Her posts, once brimming with Iquardianca power couple dreams, now begged for sponsorships, her ambition no match for the reality of Rick's ruin. Imani followed their declines through whispers, not social media, her focus fixed on her own path. Arthur Coleman joined her on the balcony, his silver hair catching the twilight as he carried 2 glasses of wine from the vineyard's first harvest. At 48, his presence was a steady anchor, their friendship forged in shared battles and ideals. To new horizons, he said, raising his glass, his gray eyes warm with pride. Imani smiled, clinking her glass against his. To building something that lasts, she replied, her voice clear, resolute. The wine, rich with the valley's essence, tasted like victory, not the bitter tang of revenge, but the sweet clarity of purpose. Coleman leaned against the railing, gazing at the resort. You've done more than build a project, Imani. he said. You've changed the conversation. His words echoed their dinner weeks ago, when he'd asked if she was ready for what came next. She was. The Arts Center sketch in her hands was proof. A space for Oakland's youth to dream, create, and rise just as she had. She thought of Coleman's story of his own loss, a project stolen by deceit, and how it had shaped his integrity. Their bond, platonic but profound, was a partnership of equals, a rarity in her world. A memory flickered. Rick's face at the gala, pale with shock as her name echoed through the hall. She'd expected to feel triumph then, but it was here, now, on this balcony, that true victory settled. It wasn't in Rick's fall or Jesse's fading star, but in the life she'd reclaimed. She'd faced prejudice, a contractor's slurs, subtle industry biases, but her work had silenced them. The etched glass panel below, visible through the suite's windows, stood as her legacy, a tribute to those who'd paved her way and those she'd lift up. Imani set her sketchpad down, the Arts Center's lines bold and hopeful. This isn't just a building, Arthur, she said, her eyes on the horizon where the sun melted into the hills. It's proof no one can steal my light. Her words hung in the air, a vow to herself and the world. Coleman nodded, his smile quiet but deep. You're proof of that, he said. As the celebration continued below, Imani felt the weight of her past lift. Rick and Jesse were footnotes now, their choices a distant echo. Her firm was thriving, her scholarship program growing, her vision expanding. She'd built Serenity Ridge not just for herself, but for every dreamer who'd been told their light wasn't enough. The wind carried the scent of vines and possibility, and Imani stood taller, her heart full. This was her horizon, drawn by her own hand, and it was boundless. Thank you for joining Imani Wright's journey, and he left his wife for a 24-year-old. But her smart revenge shocked him. We hope her story of resilience and triumph inspired you. What did you think of Imani's transformation? Or how would you have faced such a betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for more stories of strength and redemption. Until next time, thank you for listening.